Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, and I was going to be reporting from the Robert R. Muntz University of Texas Library, but I got my homework done early, so I drove on home praying that this rolling internet will stay on. But we're here tonight with our author, James Wade, who's got another great book. This is not his first time as a pick for us, and this is our September book of the month, Beasts of the Earth, a novel. James, welcome.
Hey,
Are you
thank you for
there?
having me, Miss Kathy.
Oh my gosh, I know you need to be with your family and everything. You're going to school. So how many hours are you taking? We're both going to graduate school, everybody. He's at Texas State. I'm at the University of Texas in Tyler. How many hours are you taking?
So I'm taking 9 hours, which is just three classes, one of which is a workshop on Tuesday nights, which is why we had so much schedule confusion. But I appreciate you working with me because I wanted to be able to not miss the opportunity to talk with you guys, man. I always love hanging
Well,
out with y'all. You're right. This isn't my first time here, and I'm just happy to be back.
I cannot tell you how much I love this book. I mean, Texas writers. Now, you're originally from where in Texas?
I'm originally from Lufkin, Texas. There in East Texas, not too far from you. And
Yeah.
my family and I now live in Canyon Lake, Texas.
Yeah, well, I love the way you write. Some of my favorite authors are guys. James Conroy Martin is here tonight. And, in the same vein as Larry Brown, Jan Reed, Christopher Cook. Uh, some of these are Texas writers, but Larry McMurtry, you have fell into this wonderful niche of you're a rising star. So I'm really thrilled that you could take time out of your busy schedule because you're a graduate assistant too, right?
Yes,
And your
ma'am.
major, your tell everybody your major.
So I'm in the MFA program for fiction writing at Texas State, which is a little backwards, right? You're supposed to get the MFA first, I think, and then go on to do the publishing stuff. But one of the things that I realized over my very young career in fiction is that I really enjoyed when I was able to teach writing classes, be it with the Writers League of Texas or Happy Writers or some other groups where I would just teach like 1 3 hour class on a Saturday. And I enjoyed that so much and felt like I was really connecting with aspiring writers. And so, yeah, so that kind of led me to the MFA program where if at this point you pretty much have to have at the very least an MFA in order to be a professor. But that's kind of the new goal is I'm obviously going to continue writing. My publisher could care less if I'm getting an MFA or not. They don't want to
Well,
slow down
why would they
their
care?
output.
You're
So
writing excellent books.
well, right.
It's a
So
personal triumph, it's a personal
yes, yeah,
triumph.
absolutely.
And I'm very proud of you. And the wonderful thing about getting that is, it gives you a little bit more street cred. But I will tell you that as soon as I finish my art history, I think I'm going to do that too. Because
Nice.
everybody out there in Texas, if you're over 65 like me, you can go to a Texas State University for, you can have 6 hours of tax exemption on your tuition. So I'm taking 9 hours too because I wanted that graduate assistantship and I'm doing an art history. But that's to kind of keep me going as an artist. But I'm proud of you and I'm proud of all the authors that continue their education. And so it's just befitting we're having a TGIF party. I hope you're drinking a
That's right.
beer. I'm so old. I'm drinking coffee to keep awake. Okay, Suzanne Kamata. But joining us tonight is our author who will be featured here next week, James Conroy Martin, and his book is the one we're going to be talking about is Too Soon the Night. He's got this trilogy that's a historical, and then Suzanne Kamata is going to be on our book. Well, she's been on our reading list, just like both the James, and I'm putting her back on for 2024. Now, will you have another book coming out in 2000? We talked about this, right? Do you have another book coming out in 2025? James, this James,
Oh,
the
me?
James tonight?
Which
No, the
James?
other one. The other one. The featured author. I'm back to James. The
Yes,
featured
ma'am.
author.
This will be so we'll have my fourth novel will come out next summer. I don't know the exact date yet.
Oh.
But that one's in the pipeline. So really, this has been strange. This is the first year since I began publishing that I won't have a novel out. Beast of the Earth came out late last year. But yeah, so this is kind of a year to gather and collect. And I've started a new project, and we're kind of nearing the end of the fourth novel, which will come out next year. But yeah, and it'll be set in East Texas. And so, yeah, so I was really happy to be able to kind of get back to that part of the world and explore those characters in that setting with the pine trees and the red dirt. And I really love drawing from that. And so I'm excited. It's called Hollow Out the Dark, and it'll be out next summer. I'm guessing June, but that's not for certain yet.
Do you have the manuscript done?
Yes, ma'am. The manuscript is done, and it's we're in, like, I guess what you'd call the last round of edits with the publisher, and then it'll go through copy editing and all that jazz. And so I'm looking to hopefully have some ARCs early next year. Maybe January or something like that.
Oh, wow. Well, if I could read it ahead of time, I would love to.
Oh, you're on our mailing list.
Okay, okay. Because I see all of you that are in the Pulpit Queen, posse thing. I see all of you as, discoveries, and I know that. A lot of it is chance, but a lot of it is hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. But, I'm doing everything I can to get people to read your books. And now that I'm up on campus, I'm really going to, once I get my schedule, I'm really going to see if I can start a chapter up at the library. I've gotten pretty in with the librarians there. They're fantastic. And I think it'd be really cool to have a Patriot Pulpwood Queen and Timber Guy chapter. So you never know. But, it's hard because none of us have much time to read right now. But let's talk about your book, James. First of all, incredible cover. It's almost haunting, like, have you ever read any Larry Brown?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, his books are like that. And he's long gone from this world, but I got to meet him. He's just like you. He's one of the kindest, you could be poster men for the way an author should be. Very generous with their time, and also very humble. That impresses me a lot. But this book you've got your own voice, and I want to talk about that. I got a little bit of it from your blogs this week, but where is this voice coming from? Tell us a little bit about that.
You know what? I've done a lot of these interviews, and I feel like that's one of the better questions that I've been asked. Because it takes a long time, right? I think, to develop that voice. And so when I started writing fiction, I wrote a ton of short stories. And if you were to go back and look at those short stories, there's maybe 50, 60 of them. Mm-hmm. They are all over the place in terms of voice. Like, some are written like whimsical comedies or satires, some are horror. Like, I was just almost like trying on all these different hats to see which one fit the best. And also it mimicked what I was reading at the time, because, like, I'd always been a reader, but I had never really delved into it as a profession, right? And so once I decided to do that, I thought, well, I need to catch up and read everything that I can possibly read. And so, I would read Charles Bukowski's Ham on Rye, and all of a sudden what I'm writing starts to feel a little bit like that. Like, oh, okay, well, what parts of that do I like and what parts do I not? And then I read Ben Fountain's Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, which is a wonderful book, and Ben is an amazing author and man. But I would read his, and I would start hearing his voice, and so then what do I want to keep and what do I not like? And so I just kind of did that with all these authors that I really admire, and it just kind of came all together from that. I would say, like, top three maybe would probably be William Gay, the great Southern Gothic author, Cormac McCarthy, who I go on and on about all the time, and then probably Flannery O'Connor, who I feel like her ear for dialogue was just so good, and her conversations between her characters always just rang really true to me. And so maybe those three had the most influence, but there's so many others. And I think that the biggest thing is, as McCarthy once said, books are made of books, right? And so even if we're reading a book and filtering out the voice that we don't want to have or the style of prose that we're not necessarily drawn to, every time we do that, we're learning something, whether it's what to do or what not to do. And so, yeah, it's just really all cobbled together from the authors that I admire, and the style of prose and the tone of voice that I've always just been drawn to. And then even if you try, and this irks me to no end, but people say like, oh, well, this person sounds a lot like this person, or this person sounds a lot like that person. But even if you try to sound exactly like another author, you can't, because at some point your own voice, whatever that is, takes over a little bit, right? And so even if I tried to sound exactly like William Faulkner or exactly like Thomas Wolfe, not only like from a writing ability wise, but just from a tone of voice wise, it's never going to happen. Like, it's always, everything is filtered through you. That's all writing is you're, reflecting the world as you see it through your own voice to someone else. And so it's always going to have a little bit of originality to it, no matter what.
Well, your voice is unique. I said those other authors, but you're not really like any of them, but you've got this unique style of writing. I love the blazing eyes. I mean, the blazing copper eyes. But I want to talk about one of the things you had in your blog. I did not know. I don't know if I just forgot it or something, but you mentioned that you grew up in a trailer and I want to know about your background. I mean, obviously education is the top priority for you and being a lifelong learner. How did you get from there to here?
Yeah. So, I mean, the simplest answer to that is my mom. She was very young when she got married, very young when she had me. And there was my parents had a trailer that was in between my dad's parents' house and my dad's grandmother's house. So it was almost like a
Oh,
little
yeah.
family compound, which is, that's pretty typical in East Texas. And so once I was born, my great grandmother was, I don't, kind enough or wise enough to say, I don't think that y'all should raise that baby in a trailer. Y'all come over to my house. And so she had this old house that we moved into when I was very young. And at that time, my dad was kind of bouncing around job to job. And so my mom, who I want to say at the time she was maybe working, she worked at a grocery store as a checkout girl. And then I want to say maybe she was working for like an employment firm to help, place people in positions. But anyway, she, all of this for both my parents, it was very, not minimum wage, but very low wage and not very consistent. And so my mom went back to school with a newborn, and she went to Stephen F. Austin. She got her
Oh my
degree.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and so she became a teacher, and then so for most of my life she was a teacher. And then when I want to say I was like maybe 10 or 11, she went back again to get her master's, and
Wow.
became a principal. And this whole time she's just instilling me, in me, the value of education and hard work and not complaining, because she never once complained. I mean, she's working a job, she's going to school, she's taking care of a kid. And so, but yeah, she was just wonderful in that way. And every camp, my friends would go to camp where they would like go swimming or play baseball. And I'm going to camps like library camp. I'm going to the public library, or I'm going
Is there
to,
a library camp? Really? I would have loved
yeah.
that.
Well, and in part it was because the public library there in Lufkin, Kirk Memorial Library, they were really good about having day camps so that working parents who didn't have the summer off could drop their kids, and basically it's almost like childcare, but also you're learning and you're surrounded by books. And so
That's brilliant.
so anyway, yeah, that was kind of the basis of it. And then that way, by the time that I graduated from high school, my mom had been a principal for several years at Lufkin ISD. She had worked her way out of credit card debt, out of poverty, all these things. I remember sleeping in the car on like vacations. That would be the only way that we could afford a vacation, is like stopping at a rest area on the interstate and sleeping there, just so that we could get to some very free attraction like Vicksburg Battlefield or something. But again, even that is
That's
educational,
learning.
right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
anyway, I credit my mom a million times over, because if it weren't for her, I doubt that I would have found that elsewhere. And so so yeah, I should send this to her, in case I have never told her enough, or accurately enough, how much, she did this for me. And so yeah, she always put books in my hand from an early age, and continued to foster my love for reading and writing. And I was adept at it at a young age. She said I was, reading and writing early and all that stuff. But if it weren't for her, that wouldn't have been the case. And then certainly if it weren't for her continuing to, kind of push me a little bit to stay in that lane. And so yeah, all of that I owe to my mom. And then through that, right, through reading and writing and learning, I think that I started probably in middle school to rub up against the culture that I was growing up in, right? Because my mom could only do so much. I was still at a very small school. I went to a school in Pollock, Texas called Central. It was a very small school. I think it was like 2A. And, the cultural experience there was very one sided. It was very, isolated. And so it was through reading that I was able to kind of have these other experiences, or at least learn about other people's experiences, to kind of balance that with what I was having. And so that led me to get very politically involved by the time I was in high school. And I started to let fiction slide, because I think, as a lot of us feel when we're young, like I was a little naive, but also just very passionate. And I thought journalism's going to save the world, right? Where this was during the Bush
Oh, right.
presidency. We're in Iraq, and it was just it was very the beginning of what became this very politically this political turmoil that basically we're still in today. But yeah, so I stuck to journalism for a while, let fiction go to the side. And like I said in one of the blog posts this week, it wasn't until I want to say 2015, where I had bounced around from political office to political office, and I was working at a state agency and asked for one day off, to spend a little extra time with my wife for her birthday. And when that one day off was denied, and I mean, I was like the perfect employee, right? I
I
never
believe it.
missed, any of that stuff. And would work extra hours, even though it wasn't overtime, it was just salary. And so anyway, when that one day off was denied, I really had there was like an internal shift in me, to where I just realized, you know what, like nobody cares, and you got to take control of yourself and advocate for yourself. And so then basically all of the things that I owed to my mom up until that point shifted, and then I owe everything to my wife, because she was the one who
Oh,
said, look, you've always wanted to write fiction. It's always like one of those things you talked about, had in the back of your mind, whatever. Why don't you do that? And I was like, well, I don't have the time. And she said, well, let's take the time. And so she convinced me to quit my job. She quit her job, and we hit the road and lived in our camper, 144 square foot camper. And we lived on the road for 2 years in it, just the two of us and two dogs. And
oh
during
my
that time,
gosh,
I
I
wrote
love
my
it.
first novel.
I love that. Have you ever thought about writing about that? Maybe later
Yes.
on. Because
So
you have
we
two children now too, right?
I
Two?
have one daughter and a son on the way. He'll be
Ah,
here in December.
oh my gosh. Now, that didn't happen when you were on the trip, did it? Did you have that?
well, we didn't live in the camper with our daughter, but we made our daughter in the camper, and we that's actually what got us off the road. So my wife, who is insane and wants
I
all the
love her. I
adventure,
don't even know her, but I love her. I can't wait to meet her.
she wanted to stay on the road. She was like, let's just have the baby in the camper. And
Oh my
and
God.
two things. One, I very much wanted her to I wanted us to be stationary, so that she could have the same doctor with each visit, because it was our first pregnancy. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. And then the second thing is, I remembered my great grandmother saying, you don't want to raise a baby in a trailer. And I was kind of thinking the same thing. I was like, yeah, this is basically just a trailer. And so
Yeah.
anyway, so we came back to Austin, which is where we had been living before we hit the road, and that's where we raised our daughter. We had her during the pandemic, which was tough, but yeah. Anyway, we had our daughter. We settled back down, and then now we're in Canyon Lake because we wanted to give her a little more room to kind of run around. I was fortunate enough to grow up kind of, where I could run around naked in the backyard and nobody would see. And so I wanted her to have kind of that feral child experience. And so we moved out here and bought a little piece of land, and don't regret it at all. She gets to run around every day and play in the woods and all these things that I really thought would be important for her. And so yeah, that's the life story in a nutshell. And I couldn't be happier or more fortunate to be where I am, because you mentioned this earlier. As much as it is hard work and self-discipline and a lot of things that I pride myself on, it very much is luck and timing and all of those things. Because there's a lot of talented folks out there that maybe never do get to this point, and they just catch some bad breaks. And so I'm fortunate to be here, and I try to remind myself of that so that I don't complain too much. I still complain, but hopefully not a ton.
No, you're actually quite the role model, and I'm really excited for you. And I love these stories because, a lot of people say that you have to have a life of experience before you can write, and I don't think that's true. I mean, when I think about some of my favorite writers, like Susie Hinton, who wrote The Outsiders, she wrote that book when she was 17. You know. And I know just the same way artists that I'm studying Frida Kahlo right now, and she never had any instruction in art, and she's considered the #1 Mexican icon artist, and I think that education is important to be a lifelong learner, but I think some of it comes from our DNA, or life experiences growing up, and I think those of us that grow up with not everything just given to us, where we have to work for it. My dad was military, so he is kind of like the great Santini, and so he always had us 3 girls. He treated us like boys. We were out there mowing the yard, picking up sticks, washing, waxing cars, helping him change oil, and I am thankful that I learned that from a very early age, that hard work pays off. We need to instill that in America today. Now, tell me about your daughter. She's how old now?
She's 3.5, so she turned
Yeah,
3
she's
in May.
little. But I bet she is getting an education like no other. If she's got a wife and a dad like you, I mean, a mother and a dad like you, she's going to be doing great things too. But getting kids outdoors is important. And I think it's really great that they get out and get dirty and get in the mud and learn that snakes are dangerous and be careful. Nobody ever told me, you can't go down the creek because there might be, water moccasin or something. We went, but we looked. So I grew up on a lot on my grandparents' farm. So I love your stories, and I can't wait. Now it's Hollow in the Dark,
Hollow Out the Dark.
Hollow Out the Dark. I love, your books all have a wonderful, almost connection, the way the titles of them are. How did you come up with these, or yourself, the titles?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, I just put what I would like for the title to be, and then hope that the publisher signs off on it. And so far, they have. It's almost like when you're a little kid and you don't know how to do anything, but you say, like, I'm going to start a business or a clothing brand or something, and you don't know what any of that entails. But what you do know is that you can make up a pretty cool name for it, right? And so that kind of like childish joy followed me into writing, to where one of my favorite things to do is, it's almost like I write the 80,000 word novel just so I can name it. And I enjoy it so much. It is far and away one of my favorite parts of writing, is getting able to try to find a title that encompasses the theme of the book. And yeah, it's funny. I've worked with other authors, and I won't call them out because I want people to think that it was their idea, but I've worked with other authors on their titles too, just because they'll reach out and go, "We really dig your titles, man. Can you help us here?" And
It's true. It's they're they're memorable, but they're not difficult. Because I can't tell you how many times people use when I back in my booksellers days, they would come in and say, "Yeah, do you have that book, The Bridges of Marion County?" Which Marion County was where I lived at the time, and the book was Madison County. They
right.
always get one word wrong. But yeah, you just have great titles for your books. And really, for everybody that's listening out there, if you have not read a James Wade book, you really need, you've got three, right? Three now. And you've got a fourth one coming out, and they're just really perfect for our back to school, fall back to reading. This is our September book of the month, and he'll be up for book of the year and this coming girlfriend weekend book club convention. So we're excited you're here. Now on this journey, you were writing about some of the people in your blogs. Do you want, for those that haven't read your blogs this week, they're up on the Pulpit Queen Presents. Can you just kind of encapsulate a little bit of the sharing and why you shared those stories?
Yeah, sure. The opportunity that you give authors, not just through your book club, but through, giving us the week to post each day is, I think it's a great opportunity not to just talk about story or talk about craft, but talk about the things that are behind that and get to know readers a little more and share a little more of yourself, which is always, it's always tough to kind of pick and choose, right? Like, do I want to create a brand where it's kind of me, but it's very buttoned up and almost not a lie, but definitely a little too polished, right? And I don't want to do that. I want to be open and vulnerable and as honest as I can be, because I think that creates a better connection. And so the things I chose to talk about this week were tied to my writing, but also tied to my life. And so we talked a little about kind of my fears when it comes to my work, the things I struggle with in life that kind of tie to the things I struggle with on the page. And so, to your point, each novel, even though they're very different in terms of setting and story and all that, they do have similar tones and similar themes. Usually, kind of wary but innocent young men, almost like coming of age stories, where young men are forced to mature probably a little too quickly, and they have to reckon with what is their purpose, right? Like, what is the goal of life? And that's, of course, a huge question. And you think you can't answer that in the course of a novel, and you can't. And that's the point. Is each novel kind of takes on a little tiny different piece of that, and it lets readers kind of come into my life a little bit and share again my fears, my vulnerabilities, and how I work through them on the page. And so whether that's poverty or violence or religion or any of the things that I don't quite understand, or can't fully make sense of in the world, I try to make sense of it through my characters and through their experiences, or at the very least, if I can't make sense of it, then at least have that outlet, and so sometimes that reads as depressing. I would disagree with that characterization, just because if anything, I think seeing something, even if it's something sad or something that we don't necessarily want to face head on, I think seeing something in a book that we have those same feelings, or we relate to that in some way, or hey, I felt that way before, I think that in itself is hopeful, right? And that in itself makes us feel a little less isolated and a little less alone. So I talked a little bit about all of that this week, and shared a couple of blog posts just kind of about the different types of themes and elements that are in my writing, and then shared an interview that I did with another great writer named Sid Ballman Jr., who's out in Alpine, Texas. And he was a great interviewer. I thought asked some really, really good questions, and didn't shy away from them or anything like that. And we also got to talk about Texas a little bit, which is huge for me. I mean, even if I don't always agree with our great state politically or culturally or any of that stuff, I still just have a ton of love for it, and wouldn't be who I am without it. And I've been asked many times if I'll ever write about any place other than Texas, and I always say why. I mean, there's so much
there's
rich.
so much to write.
Right. There's so much rich storytelling tradition here, and there's so many different aspects of our state that no, I will likely never write about anything other than Texas, and good. You know, I don't mind being you know, regional, if that's even a thing. Like, you know, Larry McMurtry was regional to, you know, to a degree, and I think he did
All
just fine.
authors,
So
all authors are regional. Harper Lee was a
right,
regional author. I mean, she wrote
right.
one book in Monroeville, Alabama. So, you know, I had an argument with a publisher about that. He goes, "We don't want to republish Rebecca Wells' book because she's a regional author. She's from Louisiana and we're in Washington State." And I said, "Well, so was Harper Lee. And now look at Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood and all of her, you know, I kind of got a laugh on that one. But yeah, all books are regional. There got to be set
Right.
some, but how wonderful to write about you know, Texas, because it is so diverse. I was just reading a Texas Monthly Icon magazine that somebody left at the university, and I thought, where is East Texas in that magazine? It's always Austin, Houston, you know, Big Bend, San Antonio. And I go, there was a little story on Caddo Lake, but you know, East Texas is a wealth of musicians, you know, artists, songwriters, authors, actors, you know, Forrest Whitaker. I mean, we've just got so much talent here. And I think it's because we have a lot of more time. We're not, I mean, when you live in a rural part of the world, time is not like a city, right? And
Right.
so
Yes,
I
ma'am.
never lived, I lived in a city once, and not for me. No, I live in I live in the woods, and I like it that way. And have you lived in Austin for a while? Did you live in the
We
city?
yes, ma'am. We lived smack dab in the middle for quite some time, and we were in Austin for, oh gosh, I guess about 8 years before we hit the road, and then we came back and were there for about another year before we came to Canyon Lake, and that was part of the reason we came to Canyon Lake as well, is we'd been on the road for 2 years, wide open country, you know, boondocking in most places that we went, and just away from people, away from any fast pace of life, traffic, anything like that. And so when we got back to Austin, it was a little bit of a culture shock.
Changed. It's, I
Yeah,
mean,
and
look at
so
South Congress. I mean, it's just totally
right.
changed.
Well, that's yeah. We were living, actually, before we hit the road. We were living on we had a condo in South Congress, on South Congress, and yeah, all of the staples that used to be there were all being bulldozed for more condos and more you know, shopping centers and all that. And so we sold that condo, and that's how we moved out to Canyon Lake. But I think you make a good point about East Texas not necessarily always getting its due when it comes to people talking about Texas as a state. And I think it's a topic that interests me so greatly, in part because I'm from East Texas, but also, you know, it's like you think of Texas and you think of how other people see Texas. And you think of the
Dallas.
Alamo, cowboy hats, cactus, horses, cattle, all these things that are prevalent in the Panhandle, in West Texas, oil, you know, all this stuff, tumbleweeds, whatever. East Texas is not usually what they think of, because we're more in East Texas, we're more culturally and geographically aligned with the Old
Yeah.
South, with
Yeah.
Dixieland. And
Yeah.
so we don't really fit the Texas narrative. So we kind of get squeezed out a little bit. But then we also, because we are still in Texas, we also get squeezed out of the
Exactly.
Dixie stuff a little bit. So East Texas is almost like this cultural no man's land, where we've got some Cajun influence, we've got some Hispanic influence, we've got some of the cowboy stuff, and we've got some of the Old South stuff. But really, it's just like, I don't know. And it is both metaphorically and also literally shadowed, you know, with all the pine trees and everything. It's just kind of, I don't know. I find it so unique and again so ripe for exploration. And I think we're starting to see that. I mean, obviously Joe Lansdale, who's a
Yeah.
friend of the Pulpwood Queens, he has kind of held down the East Texas writing for a while, but now we're starting to see a lot of other voices emerge. May Cobb in Longview,
Oh
Attica
yeah.
Locke, closer down to Houston. And then Carolyn Frost and Stacey Swan have written about kind of more of the Brazos River Valley, but that's, to me, that's where it starts to shift. That's kind of like the line between what is that, Interstate 45, kind of that goes down.
Yeah.
It's like everything east of that is East Texas. Everything west is more of the traditional Texas that people think of. But yeah, I am always irked by that too. And I don't.
It really drives me crazy
We'll
because
have to talk. We'll have to talk to Texas Monthly because I know that there are some good people up there at that magazine that
oh
know good and
yeah,
well that East Texas has a lot to offer. So,
I got
but
a
anyway,
nice
yes,
featuring on
I
it.
agree with you.
Yeah, it's really crazy, but I think you're going to get us back on the map. I think everybody hear my prediction. He's going to get us back on the map. So, we have this new book coming out. We have this book coming out, and you guys, it is our book of the month. So please get it. Now, I know you're going to graduate school. If anybody, wanted to do a Zoom or, like some of the chapters or anything, is there any possibility of working it in your schedule or?
Absolutely. With River Sing Out, we had a couple of Pulpwood chapters that I was able to Zoom
Yay!
with, and I thought that, I mean, that is probably the best part because book events at bookstores are fine. But when you get to do book clubs, oh man, to me that's just like that's the icing on the cake of this whole experience. And so yeah, I mean, if any book clubs are reading this and want to reach out, I mean, really, Tuesday night is probably the only night that I'm not available. But other than that, I'm here, and I absolutely love visiting with folks because I love talking about books, whether they're mine or somebody else's. And like I said, I don't think writers do themselves any favors by being shut off and kind of that like ornery, pretentious type. A friend of mine who's a great writer and historian named Jim Haley. He publishes under James L. Haley. And he once told me, he said, if you ever get in a situation where you have to act like a writer, don't just act like yourself, and I thought that was really good advice because I don't, I can write about heavy subjects or I can write about dark things, but I don't have to portray that. I'd rather just be myself so that I can talk to folks and get to know them genuinely, and not as like a character of that they may see or think of from the book, which I know disappoints some people too, right? I mean, sometimes they want somebody that's like
Dark.
I don't
Yeah.
know, dark and mysterious, but that's just not me. I'm too much of an open book, no pun intended.
It's like Jamie Ford's books always make me cry, and then you meet him in person, and he has me laughing the entire time.
Right. That's a
And
great example.
he has an all men book club that meets in a bar in Montana. We really should get you to somehow. I'll see if I can get you guys
I need to.
connected.
Well, I need to go be a part of that book club.
Yeah,
That sounds
I'm thinking
amazing.
I want to be a part of that book club. I would love
Right.
to hear what the guys have to say. I'm always interested when guys show up because the one thing about when I started the Pulpwood Queen, the publisher chose my cover, which was hot pink and leopard, and so, but I got more blurbs from the men and authors in my life like John Barrett and Pat Conroy and Christopher Cook and Jan Reed and all these people, um, than I did women. I got 66 blurbs for it, but men would see that book and they judged a book by the cover. You're a hairdresser. What could you know about books? And I go, you guys, I became a hairdresser to put myself through school. I needed a job that didn't pay minimum wage. And so I'm very proud of doing that for, most of my life. But now I'm an artist and that was the dream come true. So I understand what you're saying about everything, pertaining about your work and how you're trying to, you know, Texas has probably more authors than any state in the country. Maybe Mississippi. Mississippi has a heck of a lot of
Per
authors.
capita, Mississippi probably has a good deal. It's
I
just their
mean,
authors compared to their population.
it's amazing. But of those authors, they tend to all stay over in the Austin area. And, you know, even when the first lady, you know, Rick Perry's wife, I got to meet her and she said, we need to get you to the Texas Book Festival. And I said, she goes, have you ever been? I go, I've been featured twice. And she didn't even know it because I'm from East Texas.
That's
And,
right.
you know,
That's
I
right.
started one of the biggest book clubs in the world in East Texas, not New York, not Chicago, not Los Angeles, not Houston or Dallas, but in Jefferson. And I think that says a lot. Don Henley, my God, the Eagles. I mean, just think about all the people that have started here. So, well, maybe we need to talk about that some more. We'll have a conversation this summer.
Okay.
Unless I go to summer school. Are you going?
I don't think so. I don't think that they offer MFA classes
Oh,
in the summer because I think they want us to stick to
work.
their. I think most of the professors write during the summer, which is fine because I'm going to need to write too.
Yeah, I can see that. I know, but I may take if they. It's like, yeah, I don't know what they're going to offer yet. They haven't said. But in the meantime, everybody's going to read your book. Everybody get on the blog. You know, it's and what is your website? Do you have a website that they can go to and read more about you? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. It's jameswadewriter.com. So nice and easy. And then I'm on Instagram at James Wade Writer and Facebook at James Wade Writer. So everything is just James Wade Writer, whether it's
Oh,
a .com or an ad or anything. And but yeah, I have a newsletter that I send out
oh,
monthly from the website. And so if you go to the website, it'll prompt you to sign up for that if you'd like. It's free to be on that list. And I don't spam emails or anything. I just a newsletter once a month, and sometimes not even once a month because sometimes I honestly just can't even get around to it. But yeah, I try to stay pretty active on Instagram just to kind of share what myself and my family are up to. There's a lot of books on there and a lot of my daughter, and so those two those two things
I
are
follow
those are
your
the biggest
post.
features.
I follow your posts. I love it, but I'm going to go to the website and sign up for your newsletter and be sure and subscribe to the Pulp Queen channel on YouTube because by tomorrow morning, I will have this up. I will share it with you. And then you can share it with all your fan base. But the neat thing about recording and why I started doing this is because, you know, Casey Cowers has been interviewing authors for decades now. And he's got these oral histories, and this is kind of what it is. It's telling your stories.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
someday maybe people will recognize that, oh my God, you know, I saw a video of a former American Idol or one of those shows with a guy who's now very famous as an actor, but he was just trying out on there and singing on the show. And it's amazing how far this guy has come because he was good, but he wasn't that great, but he's great now. But you know, and that's another thing I like to invest in my authors because I like to see the growth through the years. You know, you used to be when you were published by a like Dickens time, the publisher would support you for the life of your writing. And nowadays, unless you hit big number mark, they go, well, we're moving on because you didn't sell 100,000. I don't believe in that, people. And I'm telling you, you need to read all our books. So definitely check this one out. And you can talk to this week on better hurry because James Conroy Martin is starting in on Monday. But just email him from the website and you can ask him any question. Before we go, questions from our two authors tonight. Is there any comments or anything that you'd like to make? They've got their audios off, I think. Can you turn your audios back on, please?
I'm
Yeah.
curious about your MFA experience because I too got an MFA. I went into an MFA program after I'd published a few novels and I was an older student.
Hello.
So I'm curious, did you come up with a project just for your MFA, like that you would, be workshopping in class, or was it something that you had already written, or like?
So it's basically, and this is only, I guess, what, my third or fourth week of classes, but I have already done a few workshops, and one was for a piece I'm working on. But no, I figured, if I'm going to be writing novels and expected to write things for workshop in the MFA program, I might as well not double up the work. And so I'm just letting them look at the novel that I'm working on. So like I mentioned, my fourth novel, Hollow Out the Dark, that's a little past the workshop point. And so what I'm workshopping is what will eventually be my fifth novel. So I just, let them read the first chapter or two of that, and went from there. But it's interesting. Oh, go ahead.
You already have a contract for your fifth novel? Are you working on something that you've already got a publisher for?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm with Blackstone Publishing, and I am under contract with them for 4 more books.
Oh my God. Good for
Yeah.
you.
So, well, Blackstone made a really great investment in me. Kind of like what you were mentioning, Miss Kathy. Like they said, we want to show you that it's not just depending on how one book does. We want to help you build your career and all that. And so hopefully that's still the case. If none of these books hit huge, but yeah. So I am sharing with them something that's already under contract to be published, and it's interesting because we have a lot of folks in the workshop who are probably not my intended readers, if that makes sense. Like a lot of different backgrounds, different genres that they like to read, like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff. And I'm pretty far away from that, but it's interesting to hear their comments, right? Because it brings a new perspective and just kind of what somebody is seeing. And yeah, so I've really enjoyed it so far. And again, obviously it's still very new, but so far I've enjoyed it and have already taken some good things from it, I think.
Good. That's great. Well, and congratulations to you, Suzanne, for doing that. She actually, said this before, but she went to graduate school with another one of my authors from Dallas, Will Clark, which I just think is so bizarre, because tell the university you went to.
Well, it was the
Suzanne.
University of British Columbia in Canada.
I mean, what are
an
the
optional
odds?
residency, and we were like we might have been the only two Americans.
Is
And
that crazy?
Yeah, and Will had already published like 2 books with like Simon and Schuster, and they were well reviewed and like Rolling Stone and whatnot. But the thing about the MFA in Canada was that most Canadian publishers, like the independent publishers, they only publish Canadians. So I didn't have any sense of competition, which you can sometimes find in an MFA program, because I knew I would never be published in Canada.
I bet you will one day.
Well, not by those, the publishers that a
No.
lot of my classmates were getting published by. So yeah, so I could just be happy for them.
All these weird connections. I mean, when he was telling me I can't do it because, I was telling him he had a class, and I was going, oh my gosh, you're going to graduate school too. I mean, it's all these weird connections. It's really, I always feel like both Suzanne and both James, you guys have been put in my path for a reason. And here we go all together, it's really exciting to me, and I'm dying to meet your wife. Tell me her name.
Jordan.
Jordan, next time we do a Zoom, I want to meet her. I like this girl. Is she a Texan?
She is. She's born and raised.
Yeah, I can tell. She's a strong woman, Ann Richards was always my Texas icon. And Molly Ivins. I love Molly Ivins.
Oh, yeah.
I got to meet her, and she was a trip, man. But anyway, we'll be watching your blog. I mean, if you don't want to blog this weekend, you don't have to. I want you to be with your family, but I hope people will get on there and at least, you know, make comments, ask questions, and then email you. And before we go, I just want to mention again that James Conroy Martin is going to be next week for Too Soon the Night. So you can come back, and he's got this historical fiction trilogy that is just absolutely, you know, here I am, an art history major. And quickly, I come home, and I'm doing this every week because, you know, when you send in your book and I don't pick you, it's like such a disappointment. So I thought, what can I do for all these? You know, I get over 1,000 books. So I thought,
Wow.
what can I do to at least put a shout out that'll be up forever? So I'm sharing books that I got this week while I was gone. And this one's by Eliza Clark. It's called Penance. And it's got a very interesting thing happening over this guy's head. It's got me really intrigued. So I've got to get through some of this weekend. Next up is Beth Duke. I've been talking to her. She's great. The Most Beautiful Cover Ever Tapestry. Oh my gosh. It's the books I get sent, you guys, this year are all going to be going, the ones I don't pick, to the University of Texas Library. I'm donating them to the galleys will go to the staff, and the books will go to their, you know, stack. So you're in a good place. The next one is The Marsh King's Daughter. I already know the premise of this book by Karen Dion. How long can you outrun your darkest secret? This sounds fascinating. I'm telling you, you guys, look at this one. This one just came today. This is The Fury, and it's got interesting art on the cover by Alex, and I don't know if that Michaelides. Interesting book. I've got a wonderful card in here I'm going to have to read. And then our all-time favorite author, Janet Oakley, has a new book. It's called The Bristling Code, and I got it. So, Janet, I know you'll watch this later. Thank you all for sending me the books. James, now, I told him this, that for 2025, we're doing Zoom this year for Girlfriend Weekend. And Jeffrey from Florida, Jeffrey Lawrence Matthews is going to be my co-host. But for my 25th year, I give a shout out. I have invited James to be my co-host because I want it back in Texas. It's 25 years. I want everybody to come. I think it should be a statewide celebration. And I can't think of anybody better than James right now to be my co-host. So I hope you'll say yes, and you'll have a new book, and we'll talk. Okay?
A new book, a new baby, the whole thing,
a new book,
man.
a new baby.
2024 is going to be a banner year for both of us. I can feel it in my bones.
I can feel it. And tell me your children's names.
Juniper is our little girl.
Oh, that's right.
We are undecided on the little boy. He'll be here in December, and we've got a couple names cooking, but we haven't pulled the trigger yet. We're probably going to go with a J, just since I'm James, Jordan, Juniper. We'll probably go with a J. And so we'll see. I think Jonah is the leader in the clubhouse at this moment, which fits fine with me, and was actually the lead character of my second book, which was a pulpwood pick, River Sing Out. So I would be tickled with that as well. But you know, I'm a smart man, and I defer pretty much on the majority of big decisions to my wife, and that has not led me wrong so far. So,
you know, I have to tell you, there's been 2 articles in the New Yorker magazine that I've read this week. What is happening to men today? The men today are like giving up. They're you know, quit work during COVID, didn't go back. You know, they're doing all this stuff. And then I talked to somebody like James, and all the students that I'm in classes with up there, and I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with men. They're out there. The good guys are out there, and you're going to be leading the way. So you have a great weekend, study hard, and we'll touch base. We'll touch
Yes,
base.
ma'am. Thank you so much for having me, Miss Kathy. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. I just feel so happy that we could have this party. Now go have a thank God it's Friday party. So we will see you down the road, everybody. Bye. It's all about the story. Bye,
Bye-bye.
Suzanne. Bye, James and James. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.